Hitler will have his time, then we will have ours. This quote from a German socialist in 1931 had been used by leftist streamers like Vaush to justify urging people to vote for Joe Biden in the 2020 election, basically claiming that allowing Trump to remain in power is comparable to letting Hitler remain in power. This is just blatantly wrong. Streamers like Vaush are operating under the belief that Trump is a fascist dictator in waiting, and this embodies itself in a hysteria which has resulted in them pushing for Joe Biden's victory at all costs. Ironically, the people pushing this hysteria are the same people that want us to be pragmatic and strategic with our voting patterns. I would argue that their claims about Trump's capacity for becoming a dictator is weak. I need only point to his complete lack of support from the military, his own advisors, etc. But I digress. I'd like to focus on one big disagreement I have with Vaush. Though before that, I need to make clear that Vaush does have one goal that I share with him, which is that we must find a way to unify the left wing in American politics. We simply just have different ways of how to do this. It's obvious that there has been a domination of politics by liberals and conservatives that casts its shadow over the left. To be able to get a leftist into that mainstream, and for them to have a fighting chance, there must be major changes in the left-wing strategy. In America, attacks on even moderately left-leaning individuals put emphasis on the extreme difference between liberals and socialists. This difference is key to understanding the difference between me and Vaush. While I know Vaush will agree that there is a difference between the Democratic Party and its progressive members, that's where our agreements end. Vaush is one of many leftists online that have been pushing this idea that we must vote blue no matter who. What does it mean to vote blue no matter who? Well, it's exactly what it sounds like. The belief that as leftists we need to vote for Democrats, no matter how far left they are, as long as they are opposed to a Republican ticket. Since just about everybody on the left hates fascism, and Trump's right-wing populism that plagues the Republican Party resembles many fascist tendencies, it should make sense to want to vote for Trump's opponent. However, I'd like to suggest that things are not as simple as these people say it is. This is the problem with voting blue no matter who.
We have this notion that somehow if you're poor, you cannot do it. Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids.
Vaush stands on the premise that we can gain the Democrats' support by voting for them, and with that support we'll be able to make compromises, and with those compromises it'll lead to a left-wing revolution. Though this is just not realistic, and it's not going to be the case. History has shown us time and time again that compromises are removed just as quickly as they are put into place. This should be obvious after the decades of union busting in the United States, and the way that the Republicans under Trump have been working on gutting affordable health care throughout his entire term. While in a vacuum, compromise is better than nothing, I won't dispute that. Though what I will dispute, however, is that compromise is going to last. Any sort of compromise we eke out will only be repealed later as people grow more and more complacent from its enactment. As for progressives, simply voting Democrat, hunkering down, and waiting for more Democrats to magically become progressive just simply isn't going to happen. If you look at which people are actually becoming progressive, you'll find that rather than the older ones, it's the incoming generations who are becoming aware of what the DNC stands for. Democrats are not just becoming progressives in swaths because the progressives are playing happy with the Democrats. If that was the case, they would stay Democrats. People are becoming progressives because progressives are willing to actually do something. If we lost that action, that leverage, we would lose all of our advantages and shatter the movement. That's why this is the time to demand radical change, because we need radical change to achieve any results. Critics like Vaush would speak of how this alienates the Democrats, but those Democrats that he wants to pull to our side have been against us from the beginning. Their entire party is built against the interest of socialism. The Democrats blamed us in 2016, and they blamed us for 2020. They will always blame us, because they recognize that we are an enemy. To act otherwise is completely foolish. It's brought up often, but Vaush and others like him need to realize that they are not our friend. Biden is no hero of the revolution, and this doesn't bring up any great opportunity. Nor does Pelosi. The Democrats don't care about leftists. They've acted against us at every turn. There will still be a majority opposition to the progressives and a network of lobbyists that consistently work to demolish any chance of progressive politics entering the main stage. There is without doubt a need to achieve sustainable, lasting change, and this won't happen when you're allying with the exact people who are in the pockets of those who would be hurt the most by our changes, the establishment elites and capital. A vote for a Democrat is not a vote for socialism, it's not a vote for change, it's a vote for a conservative, plain and simple. If we want to learn how to vote strategically, not just blindly voting blue, We should look at where change has actually occurred: the Republican Party. If we look at how they became the Trump Party, you can see that one clear method. They didn't show up to vote for people who opposed Trump. Can't progressives, who make up a sizable portion of the Democrats, do the same? If we just don't vote for the conservative establishment Democrats in any way, be that president or otherwise, we can take over the party. It's the only way out of this losing game.
And by the way, you know, I sit on the stand, and it get hot. I got hairy legs that turn blonde in the sun, and the kids used to come up and reach it.
Vaush does further damage to the left by attacking those who believe we should focus our opposition on Democrats as well as Republicans. Vaush spends too much time defending liberals and not enough time supporting those who want to take down the establishment. When you frame your channel as a socialist channel, and you run on the premise that a Democratic establishment is superior to a Republican establishment, you lose sight of how similar and intertwined the two really are. Liberals make appeasements to conservatives and fascists, which merely prolongs the tyranny of the elites. There's no great victory in Biden's election. There is instead a continuation of weak stances on nearly every issue. I really need to make this point clear. Liberals are not our friends, and for streamers like Vaush to portray Biden as a savior for socialists around the globe is disgustingly misleading. To alienate those who feel as though a vote for the establishment does no good for anybody is a disservice to unifying the left, and a disservice toward gaining the support of the 50% of Americans who don't vote already. We have played this game of appealing to liberals for far too long. We need to stand on our own 2 feet as a progressive movement and challenge the establishment. There should be no tolerance for those who wish to appease parties that have been built in opposition to our cause. As for those who fear alienating the Democrats, we need to realize that they view progressives as a cancer on the party and attempt to root us out at every stage. We need to recognize these facts, and from there we can act as a unified left wing with a real influence on the political climate around us. We can deconstruct what the Democratic Party stands for only through having a spine when we go to the polls, and refusing to vote for those who are not a part of our progressive movement.
Until November, we got more questions.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
Democrats like Joe Biden are not representative of leftism, nor are they representative of a newfound opportunity for revolution. This is only wishful thinking. If progressives stopped voting, the Democrats would stop winning, and if the Democrats would stop winning, they'd have to change. It's a simple concept and even simpler to implement. However, this requires a unified left wing that cares about breaking the wheel of these electoral schemes. I've been a fan of Vaush for quite some time, but I've grown upset with his pandering to the establishment rhetoric in the form of supporting the DNC in its current form by saying we should vote blue no matter who. To believe we can change the establishment by supporting it is absurd. I'd like to see his views on this change. Claiming that we are in the wrong for alienating the Democrats is nothing short of insanity. The furthest participation we should have in electoralism is to support a candidate that forwards our cause, just like any other voter. That should be the extent of our electoralism participation. Most of our work is done by widespread activism that provides proper antagonism to the establishment. Returning to the statement, Hitler will have his time, then we will have ours, it's obvious that a vote for either candidate is merely appeasement toward the establishment. The liberals are having their time, and it's about time we put that to an end.